None of the superpowers in this world has been able to win a single war in 20th or 21st century. This is something the Prime Minister Modi has been talking about, that these wars are impacting us disproportionately.
So you spoke about the possibility of a World War III. Where is India placed?
A Cold War 2.0 kind of scenario. You will have a geopolitical bloc led by US, you will have a geopolitical bloc led by China, and India cannot be part of either.
Will that be feasible?
India is a power. Let us not forget about it. We are not a banana republic that anybody can force us to do anything.
Is it anyway related to the US, sir?
Now the fact is that USA is not a trusted entity because
Today, we're diving deep into the evolving global dynamics that are shaping our world today. From the shifting political landscape in the United States to the intensifying geopolitical tensions around the globe, this conversation could not be more timely. To help us navigate these intricate issues, we're honored to have with us Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, a distinguished diplomat with decades of experience having served in some of the most critical regions, including the USA, Russia, Jordan, Libya, and many more places. His deep understanding of international relations gives him a unique perspective on the global stage, and today we'll tap into that vast knowledge. In this episode, we're discussing a wide range of topics, including the upcoming US elections and the potential return of Donald Trump, the growing complexity of Cold War 2.0, and India's role as a neutralizer in the geopolitical chess game. We'll also delve into key conflicts from the Israel-Palestine issue to the evolving situation in Bangladesh and examine Pakistan's relation with the US and how all of these pieces interlock in the global puzzle. If you're interested in understanding how these global events will shape the future and more importantly India's role in the shifting landscape, this conversation with Ambassador Anil Trigunayat is one you don't want to miss. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we dive into today's conversation, I just wanted to take a quick moment. We looked at our analytics and noticed that 93% of you who watch our videos regularly aren't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying our content and want us to keep going with more insightful conversation, we'd really appreciate if you could take just a second to subscribe. It might seem like a small action, but it goes a long way in helping us grow and bringing even more amazing content your way. Thanks for your support. It means the world to us. Now let's get back to the video.
So I would straight away dive into the conflicts that are happening around the world. But the most important one for us in Indians is the one happening in our neighborhood in Bangladesh. To begin with, sir, what are your thoughts on that?
well, Shivam, what is happening in Bangladesh or for that matter in our neighborhood is very concerning. And a few things that have happened are very unfortunate. But as you know, this is a mix of several factors in which governance remains a major issue. Connect with the people and the masses. Nobody can deny that during the past 15 years of Sheikh Hasina, the country had done greatly on various indicators, including its economy, which stabilized. But there was an impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on the economy, and therefore there was a dissatisfaction among the people. More importantly, the masses and the youth was unable to connect with Sheikh Hasina's policies and democracy per se. So there was definitely presumed to be a democracy deficit, which was made very visible by various external actors, including the United States. As you know that their ambassador, their foreign office have been talking about democracy deficit, the issues pertaining to human rights, not inviting Bangladesh for the Summit of Democracies, for example, but inviting Pakistan. Now, these things in a very subtle manner create a kind of a constituency which is already not connected with the leader. And that becomes a critical mass. And so a non-issue really becomes a big issue. And that's what we look at in Bangladesh. For example, we talk about these 30% of reservations for the families of Mukti Yoddhas and Mukti Bahinis. If you remember that Sheikh Hasina in 2018, coming from the same background, had cancelled that reservation. But some people went to the High Court and the High Court restored this. Against that judgment, Sheikh Hasina went to the Supreme Court. But this became something against her, whereas she was opposed to this reservation in any case. So you can see that this kind of a thing becomes a major problem. And this became an issue. Secondly, she could not gauge the discontent among the masses, especially the youth. If you know the history of Bangladesh, every major movement that has been engineered by the students. The students are a very strong lobby in that country. Now, if they are coming out against and protesting against it, and you shoot at sight or so many are killed, then you are looking at a very major problem. And then the other factors, whether the BNP party, whether the Jamaat-e-Islami, whether the Americans or the Chinese or the others, they all pitch in at the time. And when they all pitch in, then the result that we have seen happens.
Before we go further, sir, you had recently visited Bangladesh for some conference a couple of years ago. What kind of sentiment did you see in the people and the leadership of Bangladesh?
Well, unfortunately, I must say that a large number of people that I met, they said that the country, there's hardly any democracy. Most of the people used to complain. They were also feeling the pinch because of economic issues that were happening. So the USP that the economy is doing well was snatched away because of the international issues like Russia-Ukraine war that impacted all the countries through these 3 Fs or 4 Fs, food, fertilizer and fuel. And that is something played against Sheikh Hasina, because see, today you will not find anybody except perhaps some Awami League who would be speaking in favor of Sheikh Hasina.
That was the sentiment at that
prevailing,
time,
yes, 2 years ago.
2 years ago. I want to also understand from you, how did a protest which was focused on the job quota and unemployment changed into something which is a bigger problem for us, which is how they're treating the Hindus at the moment. The genocide, the so-called narrative of Hindu genocide.
Well, I tell you, it's very interesting that unfortunately in many countries in the South and South Asia, the minorities become the butt of the violence whenever these kind of movements happen, because it's easier to do that. They're a vulnerable community. Hindus are barely about 1 crore plus now. But I remember during the late 80s, when I was there, we had General Irshad government. That will give you an idea exactly. There were 2 crore Hindus, 10 crore Muslims. Total population was 12 crores of Bangladesh. But President Irshad will only talk about Das Koti Manush, means those 10 crore Muslims. That was his, he would never acknowledge. There were a lot of attacks against Hindus, disenfranchisement of Hindus, lack of opportunities for them. So this was very much seen there. So this has been continuing, and today you have less than half the population of Hindus left in the country, which speaks for itself. But I also know and say that Bengali people, whether in West Bengal or in East Bengal, they are connected by culture. Until very recently, I would say, the culture prevailed. So the people really loved Rabindranath Tagore or Nazrul Giti in the same manner, both sides. But at the same time, when the opportunities become less, other side start doing slightly better, you always have this kind of a problems. And it is a very major issue, which I think that whether it's interim government, whether it is army, whether the forthcoming governments, they must address it. This is frankly a sitting time bomb for them.
Can India do anything to safeguard those Hindus?
Well, I think the Prime Minister Modi has very clearly conveyed to interim President, Prime Minister Mr. Yunus, their Home Minister apologized to the Hindus for not being able to provide security for the Hindus. It has been written about, it has been spoken about everywhere. Now I think that they understand that this cannot continue. The government and the army. But as you know, there is no police there. It's a complete civilian disorder. Now, until and unless that's the job of the police to essentially control and provide law and order. So, of course, and Mr. Yunus also spoke to Prime Minister recently. So, everybody is wanting to do something. But then in the society, there are these rabid fundamentalist elements and also unruly elements. They want to convey a message. So that is bringing a bad name to Bangladesh also. I think that what India has done is flag the issue with the authorities. If they need India's help, India will be able to help. But I don't think that there are two other options that you have, which I discount completely. One is that you open your borders and let these 1 crore Hindus come into India. That's not a solution. Secondly, you try to project force. That is also not a solution. The solution is to work with the Bangladesh government, which is going through a very difficult phase, and to help them control the situation, bring about, and so that they continue on the path of stability, security, and prosperity.
What are your thoughts on the interim leadership, Mohammad Yunus? What kind of person do you think he is? Is he capable enough to handle this situation which is looming in Bangladesh?
Well, that would be seen in due course. It's an interim government. He is a Nobel laureate. He has done well. People trust him. Most importantly, the youth trusts him. So that is very important. See, in a leader, if you don't have a trust, the leader cannot continue. So they even want him to continue beyond. But they don't have any regard for any of these political parties, whether it is the Awami League or BNP or the Jamaat-e-Islami. That is the young people. Don't want any of them.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see how it plays out eventually. But at the moment, he's trusted. But he has to take charge because it's a technical government for interim transition only.
About what you said, the youngsters do not trust any of the leadership of the political parties at the moment. In fact, I was just reading before our podcast that the youth want to create another political party. Will that be feasible?
Well, it's, for all practical purposes, it is not that you're going to write off everybody. They have institutions. They are well entrenched in the society. Whether it is Awami League, whether it is BNP, they've been there for a long time. There are radical elements which are very much with Jamaat-e-Islami, driven by Pakistan. So I think that they will all coexist. But my fear is that if they create one party, let's say Future of Bangladesh or Sonar Bangla or something like that, even if they create that political party, and if it doesn't win enough seats, because it's not only the students who are going to vote, everybody is going to vote in that election, then you might have another chaos. So that could be there. I hope they can have some kind of a national government. They do not, it should not be that they just go after the Awami League or go after another party or people or minorities, because that is not going to help Bangladesh.
I was again reading about how there are over 50 charges on Sheikh Hasina at the moment. And they want to bring her back from India to Bangladesh for hearing. Do you think India is getting a bad PR in the process because Sheikh Hasina settled in Delhi at the moment? And does that bring bad light to India? That means that we support her fully?
It's not a question of full support or not. It's a question that if somebody has come to your country who has been your friend as well, who has looked after your core interests in many ways, while taking the country, India's contribution to Bangladesh is not only during the independence, but thereafter, in building Bangladesh kind of a nation, a strong nation that it is. It is performing much better than anyone else, and certainly it was doing better than India also. So all that happened because they had the stability, and because they had certain policies that favored them, and India was a great helper in that regard. So I think that if she has chosen to come to India, and her life was in danger, it is normal, and that you give them. We have had Dalai Lama in India forever, now 70 years. We have had the Afghan president's family here living there. Sheikh Hasina herself lived here for 5 years after the death of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. We have had many of their leaders staying here. You have Taslima Nasreen, the famous author who has been wanted by the Bangladeshis forever. So it happens. People go to different countries, seek refuge. She wanted to go to UK, but for certain political reasons, geopolitical reasons, UK has not yet approved her application. She doesn't want to stay in India for good. But she is a guest, and as long as she continues. Coming to your question regarding extradition, we do have an extradition treaty. But the extradition treaty does not cover people who are looking political asylum, because the life is in danger. That's the reason countries allow them. It is for criminals, basically. And of course, there will be there. Besides, there is a long process, legal process, of identifying, then charging, then the courts asking, then the letter rogatory issued. Then it will be vetted by the Indian courts, whether it has been proper justice has been done or not. And thereafter you decide whether the particular case falls in that or not. And India is a power. Let us not forget about it. We are not a banana republic that anybody can force us to do anything. We want well for Bangladeshis. We want to work closely with the Bangladeshi people for their benefit. But that doesn't mean that anything that is going wrong, India could be a party to it.
Right. Understood, sir. That's an important point. So, Sheikh Hasina also mentioned the reason of these protests and her abruptly leaving was a foreigner who asked her for a piece of island in Bangladesh. Is it anyway related to the US, sir?
Well, I think that this has been written about, has been attributed to her also, that she said that there was St. Martin Island, which the Americans wanted basically to pitch in their battle between US and China, essentially. Where Bangladesh, under her rule also, were very close to China. So India and China, she was maintaining a very rather good balance while promoting her country. I mean, that was what she was trying to do. But the Americans who are getting back into the region, we have seen is they are now everywhere. They're trying to get back and some kind of an ascension and approach in the region. So they may have asked. But the fact remains is, as I mentioned in the beginning, that the American commentary about democracy, about human rights, about other problems and sanctioning some certain individuals, certain groups, all tend to indicate that they were not interested in Sheikh Hasina continuing. And especially after the last elections, it became very much intensified. So there could as well be a hint, but it's a mix of many factors. It is not only that the Americans did it or it is this, but it was her own governance model, I think, that failed.
True. How does Pakistan see this situation in Bangladesh?
Pakistan would be happy because they feel that now that the pro-India Prime Minister has, unfortunately, she's been perceived in Bangladesh by the ordinary people. So for Pakistanis, this is a godsend. Fortunately, they've been working on it with ISI and others. Also, the Jamaat-e-Islami is an extension of Pakistan. So obviously, they are very much part of it. She had banned that organization. So they'll come back. We used to have problem on our borders. And if BNP or Jamaat or some other political parties who are anti-India come to play, then we'll have a problem that on the one hand, you have Pakistan. On the other hand, you will have Bangladeshi border that will be volatile for us. So that will be a challenge that we'll have to contend with.
How does China perceive this as well?
Well, I think China is in both ways will be benefited. It all depends. I mean, it will depend on, like, as I said, that BNP, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party of Khalid al-Zia, was supported by USA to a great extent. But China has been a big player in the region. Sheikh Hasina was also providing China whatever he wanted, legitimately, although she told them that our relationship can't be at the expense of India or anything else. India's interests are also very good. So she did take care of that. At the same time, China and Pakistan nexus, everybody knows. So they tend to benefit either way, directly and indirectly. I think they'll continue to play a role in this particular scenario. I don't think they're going to lose much.
So I've got to ask you a question about your perception on this situation in Bangladesh. Do you think is anywhere linked to the conflicts the bigger conflicts that we are seeing in Gulf and Europe, such as Israel, Palestine, and Russia, Ukraine? Is there anywhere related?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this Russia-Ukraine war, when it started, it was mainly because of the insecurity feeling of the Russians and the expansion of NATO. That was the fundamental cause. And geopolitical competition between Russia and US that played out. Russia is a decimated power. It is no longer, it has the largest nuclear arsenal, but it is still a power to reckon with. And Putin remains a strong leader whom the Americans don't like, obviously, the Biden administration. So he wanted securities from them, which in my view was very naive, that given security that this will not be done. Because Trump, for example, had thrown out of the window all the treaties that were signed. So it's a piece of paper. But that could have prevented this so-called special operations or invasion into Ukraine. Ukraine is the biggest country in Europe, second biggest after Russia, and the largest border, and it was a buffer for Russia. Now that was breached. But when Russians did that, they were already under sanctions because of 2014, the Crimea annexation. The Russians were cut off from the international financial system by SWIFT and all that. And I say that there are four types of crises that occurred, which impacted the whole world, which I call as 4F. The first one was weaponization of the financial instruments by the United States. Then you have Russia reacting through the 3Fs, which is food, fertilizer, and fuel. Started putting supplies constraints, and that impacted the whole world, and more so the countries which are in the global south, as we call it, including India. But we chose to open our channels with Russia and started importing very large quantities of oil, like crude oil. Bangladesh, in that sense, had a foreign exchange crisis. So it had this problem. So the economy, in that sense, was impacted a great deal by this particular war. And that decelerated their economic growth and therefore discontent among the people also. So it had an impact. It had an impact on every country. You know, just we had the third Voice of Global South Summit only yesterday, I think. This is something the Prime Minister Modi has been talking about, that these wars are impacting us disproportionately.
Since you mentioned the Global South Summit, what are your thoughts on that? This is the third edition.
This is actually, India has always stood for the rights of the developing and underdeveloped world, even when they were colonized 70 odd years ago. And since then, Prime Minister Modi, the G20, as you know, the first thing he did was that we must call a G20 summit. So it was a virtual summit in January of 23. We took over in December, January. Within a month, we had this summit. In that one, India tried to ask all these 125 countries, what are your priorities? Very often, most countries know what the others want, right? We also know what they want. But he said, no, let them speak out. What are their priorities? Rather than us telling everybody. I mean, you ask any consultant, he'll write a paper of 500 pages, giving you and telling you, oh, this is what the developing world wants. But the fact that they became partners in this and stakeholders in that, and then India carried it into the G20 discussions and to various verticals and tried to focus on that. That's one. Secondly, African Union. To make African Union as a full and permanent member of the G20, taking it to G21, I think was one of the biggest and crowning achievement of India. And that is something that has once again reconfirmed the fact that India stands with its benign foreign policy, with its capacity building assistance, with its support for the cause. And it is also strategic in nature. It is not something that is just happening like that. But in November, after the G20 summit, we had second summit to tell what happened, where have we arrived after our discussions, not only leaving it at that. And now this is the third summit in 2 years. So you can imagine that this is something which India has institutionalized. And in all the three, there were more than 120 countries that participated. There were 21 heads of state this time. Africa is having another meeting of SADC countries and all that. Some of them could not participate because those were pre-planned. Now, this is a virtual summit so far, but we'll have to go a step further. This is strategic in the sense is, in my view, that the world is divided now. There is going to be, in my view, I may be wrong entirely, a Cold War 2.0 kind of scenario. You will have a geopolitical bloc led by US, you will have a geopolitical bloc led by China, and India cannot be part of either, in my view. So we'll have to find our own way, taking along a policy of multi-alignments, strategic autonomy, and who is there with you in that? It is the Global South. They have trust in you, in your leadership. So it's a very strategic move in my view also. While it is, of course, a very humanitarian kind of a thing that we are doing it, or driven by our Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam policy.
True. We are really being seen as the leader of the Global South at the moment. And that helps us in different domains, like you said. It's coming back to Russia-Ukraine, sir. The war has been happening for the last 2 years. But for the first time in 2 years, we saw an offensive from Ukraine. Was that a bold move for Ukraine, or was it not very wise?
I think that until recently, we have seen Russia has already taken about 25% of the territory, which they wanted to create into a buffer state. There are four special zones, countries, or independent part of Russia they have created. Now, these are very huge territories we are talking about. Russia is the biggest country in the world. Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe. They are not small countries. They have huge areas. Populations are very small, both the countries. The armies are not that big. Of course, Russia has 5 times more army than Ukrainians. Large number of Ukrainians have left. But they are being pumped in with a lot of arms, ammunition, and others, and foreign fighters, and this, both sides. So, off and on, they want to send a message that we are there, we can negotiate, we can talk about this. Now that there is a lot of factors, like there is a possibility that Trump might come to become he has been saying, if I come within 1 month, I'll close this war. If, for example, Europeans are having a problem, there are more righteous groups are coming in everywhere. Support base is gradually reducing despite all the statements that have been made by various countries. Russia's economy is doing well despite the problem. It's a war economy, so it's doing much better.
Even after 16,000 sanctions, it's just the economy is thriving. So
thriving, and it is creating an alternate order now. None of the superpowers in this world has been able to win a single war in 20th or 21st century. You look at China lost in Vietnam, US lost in Vietnam, US lost in Afghanistan, Soviet Union lost in Afghanistan and got disintegrated. Iraq, it's a lost war. I mean, you can't call it a victory. Middle Eastern war. Hamas is a non-state actor. Yet, 10 months down the road, there is only destruction. But there is no resolution of it. So this shows clearly that the era of small, short wars is over. So anybody going for a war must be prepared for a long war. Normal armies are prepared for a maximum 6 weeks. The supplies, So today Russia is able to produce 5 times more supplies, munitions that they require. The other countries, including the US, have a 6 months long wait. Other countries don't have that. They have to also look after in case the war escalates into a NATO versus Russia war, direct war. Today it is indirect, but if it is direct war, then they are preparing for it. Russia is keeping aside a certain amount of its forces, its arsenal, latest ammunition, autonomous weapon systems, essentially to counter in case there is a war with NATO. So it's a very peculiar kind of a situation. Personally, I feel that both the wars can stop if Washington wants it.
is there a possibility to have a war with NATO and US-led NATO and Ukraine leading?
If you see the First and Second World Wars, they were started with a very small spark. And you never know. One incident can lead to escalation. So both sides are armed to the teeth. Now, to what level they want to take it? That is the thing. To what level of being destroyed you want to be ready for it rather than live in peacefully. So it is the choice that all sides have to make. Whether the backers of Ukraine must agree, Ukraine should agree, and Ukraine must get I would say, a proper deal in the process. Today what has happened is all these superpowers, they don't care about multilateral institutions. They do what they please.
So this attack by Ukraine is like a leverage for them to get a better deal.
In the ceasefire deal that everybody is talking about, so they want to also have some kind of a negotiating leverage in that. If they are able to hold it, my doubt is they will not be able to hold that area that they have gone in, 30 kilometers.
That's an incredible feat, though, by the Ukrainian armed forces.
Yeah, in that country, if you visit Russia, you visit Ukraine for miles and miles, and not a soul. So it's much more easier. But that's a strategic place, Kursk, because from there is a place from where all the gas goes to Europe in that place. So they have nuclear power plants and all. So this is an important thing. Today, Russia is controlling Zaporizhzhia plant in Ukraine, right? And there is a fear that if that plant gets attacked and blows up, then what will happen to the people we have seen in the past. So that's a very major problem that everybody has to be worried about, the whole world.
So you spoke about the possibility of a World War III. Where is India placed in this kind of conflict where there's the West and the Russia-China?
Well, India so far has been trying to put some sense into all the warring sides. Prime Minister Modi, I would say, and has openly said, and we say the dialogue and diplomacy, respect for the UN Charter are very important. We have PM was in G7 summit. After that, Puglia and Italy, and then thereafter he went to Russia. He had now he's going to Ukraine. So we are trying our best to put into their heads that look, the war must end. Terms and conditions, exactly how they are going to end is to be decided between the two sides. But as an interlocutor, it becomes easier to know the red lines of the two sides. Because today the positions are vertical. With the vertical positions, you cannot negotiate, you cannot talk to one another. talking to the deaf. Therefore, they have to bend and come down to the table. Then only they can have. So I think that's an effort that India is trying to make.
So, since we spoke about the war in Ukraine, we must talk about the Gulf War as well, that's ongoing for the last 10, 11 months. We recently saw that the Hamas leader was assassinated in Iran. That was another very bold move by Israel. What are your thoughts on that, sir?
Well, it shows that they're both Israel and Iran, the two major protagonists of this war, have not lived up to their reputation of having great intelligence. October 7th would not have happened if everybody continued to believe Mossad was the best, Israeli army is the best. But what happened there is unprecedented. 1,200 people killed and 250 taken hostage. Terrorist attack. The whole world said this terrorist attack. What is happening in Israel, in Iran, by Israelis killing Ismail Haniyeh, knowing too well that he is their a target, because from day one, Netanyahu has been saying that we will finish or destroy Hamas completely. Now he was a Hamas leader. It was, in my view, not a great move, and the Israelis have so far not admitted to that. You know, that's, yeah, well, that's, everybody knows it, but they have not admitted like they have done to others. Because they know at the moment they do it, they become legitimate target for Iran. Because to attack. Today, it's a kind of provides also a face saving to the Iranians. Although they have concluded that it was the Russians. It was the Israelis which have done it. But they have been told by the Russians to go slow. The Americans are, Blinken has come the 10th time into the Middle East yesterday and talked to everybody that some kind of a ceasefire deal should be there. In the process, Yahya Sinwar has become the leader. Yahya Sinwar is also a hardliner. More hardliner than Ismail Haniyeh was. And therefore, the situation is now stuck about the ceasefire deal. As Blinken said that it is a last chance maybe to get the hostages out or to get some kind of a ceasefire. But then look at the kind of destruction that has happened. So, 40,000 people dead, 90,000 people injured, thousands of children, so many UN personnel, so many media. And Israelis are not happy either. They are also suffering in the process because Hezbollah from the other side has started attacking. So the northern Israel is in the face of the fire. They'll fight them. Then Houthis in the Yemen and Red Sea are creating mischief. So Iran doesn't have to directly fight. It has all these 3 or 4 lobbies, proxies. They are upping the pressure onto Israel. So US is coming in between to help them. Now the fact is that USA is not a trusted entity because it is also providing arms, ammunition, full support of the UN and everywhere else to Israel. And it always says that right of Israel to exist will be defended by the United States. That means it wants to become a direct party to the war if there happens. Yeah. And that is why what we are seeing is the delayed and dragging of this ceasefire process. Netanyahu's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, himself has said that it's an unachievable objective, destruction of Hamas.
Is it?
Yes. Himself said. His other partner in the war cabinet, Benny Gantz, he resigned. Problem is that many people think that this war is being run mainly because of personal ambitions or fears of Netanyahu.
Yeah.
He thinks that there are cases against him. Plus, he does not want to probably go with the stigma of October 7th, that Israel was caught unawares, totally. Now, that is something I think that's driving this war. You cannot, because see, in the process, they say that they have killed so many people. But in the process, you have created far more radicals who are going to be a problem tomorrow as well. So the only solution to this is that both sides must be pressured enough to accept the ceasefire deal. And hopefully, there would be some ceasefire deal, the poor hostages will come back. And then we must work on, international community must work on some kind of a two-state solution because they know their way out.
So, but the Gulf nations and the rest of the world is speculating an attack from Iran. Do you think that ought to happen?
Well, I think that Iran says that it is a legitimate right to respond because it was done on its territory. But at the same time, Iranians generally, Hindi mein bolte na, kheer thandi karke khate. So they are waiting for the right time. And as I said, they said that if the ceasefire deal happens, we will not do this or that.
Is it?
Yes. Mm-hmm. But it is not easy. Everybody is waiting for the ceasefire deal. Because see, why it happened. Ismail Haniyeh was a target, we know it. If the Israelis have done it, they have not accepted, as I said. So if they accept, yes, we killed him tomorrow, then Iran will be forced to directly respond, like it did the last time, when the Israeli missile hit their embassy in Damascus and killed 7 of their IRGC soldiers or advisors, whatever they call them. So I think that this is a situation which can escalate then way beyond. And that's why neither the Arab countries, nor America, nor China, nor Russia, and India in the first place, because we will be impacted a lot if the war breaks out completely. We have 9.5 million Indians there. We are getting about 70% of oil and gas supplies from there. We have all the sea lanes of communications there. So all this will come into a stress. So it will be a very major impact on us also. So everybody is wanting that these wars must end at the earliest.
So we spoke about 3 major conflicts, starting from Bangladesh, we went to Russia, Ukraine, and then the Gulf in Israel. But the common factor, if you think about it, is the United States. So. And now we are seeing that the US is going to have fresh elections in November, and the Democrats and Republicans are the 2 options. What do you think is the better options for the US in order to have a better world around, sir?
Well, US is a major factor everywhere. The reason is only hyperpower today, which is the capacity to operate everywhere militarily. Its public chips are down in the public perception. It is not being seen as a power that wants to maintain peace and equilibrium. It is being seen as a power that is stoking flames, which is not a good thing for the United States. Everybody hoped that the rule-based order that has been set up in 40s, 50s, 60s would continue to. But if you violate yourself those orders, the multilateral system and others, then you cannot be the champion of the rule-based order. That's the unfortunate part. There's a larger strategic issue that the Americans need to think. At the same time, it is for the Americans to decide who their next president is going to be, whether it is President Trump or it will be President Kamala Harris. We'll see it, but at the same time, both are going neck to neck. And as the US politics is very clear that there are Republicans are lifelong Republicans mostly. The Democrats are lifelong at the family level everywhere. So they are very committed lot, as you know. And there are floating votes are not so many. Likewise, some floating states. These wars also have created a certain kind of an impact in the United States on the economic level, on the opportunities level, on the growth levels of the country. The military-industrial complex may be doing very well for the Americans, but it has its own limitations. So I think that whoever wins will think of America first. That is something I think that whether it is Kamala Harris or whether it is Trump is more accentuated, make America great again, MAGA. He has some policies, sometimes he takes decisions which seem to be like done on Twitter or something X like that now.
With Elon Musk, he had in the interview as well.
On the other hand, Democrats, their policies are pretty much evident what they will do. But with Trump, it's also an X factor. So we'll have to see how it evolves. Still a few months to go. We'll have to see whether at the end of the day, it is not the elections are not decided in the United States on foreign policy. They are decided on domestic issues. So whoever addresses the domestic challenges better will have a better chance.
Absolutely, sir. What a lovely conversation this has been, sir. Very geopolitical overview kind of things that are happening around the world. We at DOAP have a new tradition where we ask the previous guest to leave a question for the next guest, that is you. A question for you from General Rakesh Sharma, which is left is that
the policy of strategic autonomy that we have, does it seem that we may be at times stuck between 2 parties and not know where to proceed? I'm not saying we should take sides between one or the other, but strategic autonomy can get problematic sometime with one partner or the other, and that may retard us in times to come. So what is the larger thought process on strategic autonomy that we need to follow?
I think that's the best thing, because the fact is that India is a civilizational state. It is the 5th largest economy, it is the largest democracy, it is the most populous nation in the world. It is the biggest opportunity in times to come. It will become a developed economy by 2015. You cannot become like that by taking sides of XYZ. So it is important for us to have our strategic autonomy and create a critical mass of like-minded countries. We are not in 1947 when we had non-aligned policy, the 50s, but we are now in the 21st century, where the countries that we got their independence in the 60s, 70s, 50s are the countries that have become much better. So they also want their national interest to be served. I feel that India could be a third pole in this multipolar world that we're looking at, and that will be the nations for a strategic autonomy. India could lead that grouping, which is also reflected in our quest for the voice of being the voice of the global south.
What I understood from his question was that does India get stuck a lot of times in the middle of conflicts?
Well, if you have to take a principled foreign policy stance, that's India's strength, which is serving your national interest. The parties in different blocs will not like it. We have dealt with it long ago, not now. When we were very weak, at that time we used to deal with this. So today, what prevents us from doing that? Against the American or the Western wishes, we have been continuing to import crude from Russia, right? Because it serves us, serves our interests. We are continuing to have ISET, or the technological collaboration and cooperation with the United States. We work in Quad, we work in BRICS. Now, it gives you choices. Today, you have strategic choices and you have the heft to carry it. You have a strong leadership. Once you have a strong leadership, you have a strong ideas, you have a value-based foreign policy. I mean, we have not told anybody go to war and kill this one or that one. We always say that wars must be stopped. We should be dialogue, diplomacy, and peace must be the primary criteria for coexistence in the world. And we are talking about the issues for the developing world with the other developed countries, taking their side. There is nothing good or bad. What is good for you is your own national interest in the first place. So if you are a strong country by yourself, then only you can help others.
Absolutely, sir. What a lovely answer to that question, sir. Before we end this conversation, I've got one personal question, if you may ask. Last time I asked you if there's any book that you would have read earlier in life, and you answered Bhagavad Gita. Rightly so. I'm going to ask you the same question again. Barring Bhagavad Gita, if there was any other book that you wish you would have read earlier in life, which would that be?
No, I had read a book, and my favorite author used to be Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, and Virtue of Selfishness. Those are very important books because they correlate with the Charvak philosophy of the time. That's what we're talking, national interest, self-interest. So it's a strategic thing. That's something at a very young age. I read that book and it had a good impact on me for many, many years. Then I read one more book by, which many people may not have seen copy of, called Sasti Brata, used to be a Bengali author. He wrote a book called My God Died Young.
My God Died Young.
Small, thin book, but solid. At least I thought so.
What was it about, sir, if I may ask?
It's about the life, personal life, the story of his.
Is it spiritual?
How did he, spiritual, yes. But how did he basically go through the life and the experiences what they taught him? So that was very interesting.
How did that book change your perspective on life, sir?
Well, that you have to have faith in yourself. You see, then nobody else is going to come and help you if you don't help yourself.
Wow. Lovely end to this conversation, sir.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to have you again. And thank you so much for spending the time. It has been an insightful conversation for me. And I'm sure the audience had a lot to take from it.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
We at DOAP are working really hard to take this podcast to the next level. Our guests are going to get even better. Our production quality is going to get even better. And hopefully, I'm going to get even better too. Most importantly, we are committed to being consistent and continue to do what we love the most. Until then, keep reimagining yourself and know that the power of change lies within you. Jai Hind.